All right, now making histograms is kind of a pain. We saw making box plots is pretty fast, but I don't know, it's still a little annoying. So it turns out our calculator can do these things for us. So I have my income data in list 2. So if I go over list 2, there's all that income data. So let's say I want to make a histogram of that income data. Well, what I can do is I can hit second, y equals, so I get that stat plot option. And I can turn on these plots. In other words, I can turn on different graphs. So I can make all sorts of different graphs. So if I go to plot 1, hit enter, I want to say, okay, I want to turn my plot 1 on. I want to make a graph. I want my calculator to make that graph, so I'm going to turn it on. And ask, well, what type of graph do you want to make? Well, if I want to make a histogram, I'm going to select the option that looks like a histogram. That guy looks like a histogram. So I scroll down, move over, hit enter. And then it asks, well, what list of data do you want to use on your histogram? Well, I have my data in list 2, so I'd use list 2. If you had your data in list 1, you would hit second L1. Okay, but I'm using list 2, so I'm going to hit second L2. And then this option here, frequency, don't worry about that. We'll just always leave that at 1 in our class. You can talk to me later about what you would use that for. All right, and then we want to make a graph, so we'll hit graph. Calculator thinks and nothing appears. Well, the reason why nothing appears is because my calculator is set at the window from -10 to 10. It's only looking at x values between -10 and 10. Move my cursor around, I see that. Well, that's a problem because, I mean, our data is between the values of 21 and 65. So I should be changing my window. So if you want to change your window, you can change your x values here and your y values in the window. You can set the minimum x value you want your calculator to look at, the maximum, etc. Turns out, though, if we just hit zoom and we go all the way down to 9, zoom stat, and we hit enter, turns out our calculator will find a good window for us. So there we go. We see a histogram of men's salaries now. Now, if you hit trace, you can move along the histogram and you see, okay, this first class, it starts at 21. It goes up to $29.8 thousand. But then you see that the max in that class is less than 29.8. So what that means is if someone made $29.8 thousand, he would belong to the next class over here. And we see, okay, there were 3 people in this first class, 10 people in the second class, 6 people in this second class, 0 people, 0 people, 1 person in the last class. Now, if you want to change your class width, you can do that. So if you hit window and you want your class width to be, say, $5,000. So your calculator is using $8.8 thousand. Well, you just type in 5 into X scale. Go back to graph. And there we go. Now we have a little bit different of a histogram. So what we see is that we have a bit of a tail going on. If we ignore this outlier, we do have a bit of a tail on the left. So our data is slightly skewed to the left, a little bit. It's pretty darn close to symmetric, but does have a slight skew to the left. All right, let's say we want to make a box plot. You can hit second, y equals. All right, now I'm going to turn my histogram off. So I'm going to hit enter, scroll over to off. All right, so I'm going to turn my histogram off. I don't want to work with that histogram anymore. Now I'm going to hit second, y equals, and I'm going to say, oh, let's go to plot 2. Let's make plot 2 to be a modified box plot. So I'm going to hit enter. I want to turn the graph on, and I want to say, okay, well, which type of graph do I want to make? Well, I want to make a box plot. So I select the one that looks most like a box plot. Now I got 2 options right here. Here's a normal box plot, and here's a modified box plot. You see they're trying to show you dots for outliers. Let's make a modified box plot. Hit enter. All right, I'll be using list 2. So second L2. All right, and now I will hit graph. And there we go. Now I got a modified box plot. And if you hit trace, you can move around and see, okay, the min's at $21,000, Q1's at $31,000, median's $37,000, Q3 $41.5 thousand, etc. Outlier at $65,000. All right. Now, so we can tell from our box plot that things are a tiny bit skewed left, that we have a bit of a tail going on here on the left side. If you want, you can stack up both the box plot and the histogram. If you hit second, y equals, you can turn plot 1 back on. Enter, hit graph again, and now you have a modified box plot stacked above your histogram, which is kind of cool. And so this allows you to compare histograms and box plots and think about what information they're telling you. So we see, again, our box plot, each section represents 25% of the data. So this section's the lowest 25%, next highest 25%, 25 to 50th percentile, 50th to 75th percentile, and then 75th percentile onward. So we see that the top 25% of data values without the outlier are pretty close together. Same thing for the next 25% of data and the next. And the lowest 25% of data is spread out over a bit wider interval. So our histogram is, or our box plot is showing us we have a tiny bit of a tail. Again, not much. This isn't terrible, but a slight skew, because this side of the box plot is a little bit longer. This box is a tiny bit wider than this box, and it's telling you a little bit what your histogram looks like without you having to draw the histogram.